that proportion is 75% unqualified, 25% qualified. And I'm sure some of y'all are listening. You're like, I'm 100% qualified for every job I apply to. I bet you're not. I bet you are not. Let me tell you how I know this, because I have clients. For example, I have this one lady and she applied for a job at a very, very popular Silicon Valley company. And I go, it says here you have to be fluent in either Spanish or Portuguese. Are you? She said, no. I go, why did you apply to this job? And she said, well, because it was remote. And I go, but you don't speak these languages, therefore you are wholly unqualified for this job. And she was like, yeah. So really look at the job qualifications. That job description is written in a way where they're telling you exactly what they're looking for.
Welcome back to this episode of Secrets of the Career Game. So many people are trying to navigate a corporate world that is laden with secrets, cleverly hidden, and unspoken rules to a game that most employees don't even know that they're playing. On this podcast, we try to give you a peek behind the curtains and some tips and tricks to ultimately make you successful in your career and help you progress a little bit faster. Hello, lovelies. Welcome back to the pod. Today's guest was actually sent in by you guys as a request to have on the podcast because some of her content was so relatable and so interesting that you guys wanted to hear what she had to say. So today we have Farah Sharghi. She is a career coach, a content creator, and a former Google recruiter who helps professionals navigate their job search, land promotions, build high-impact careers without burning out. She was a technical recruiter before she was out on her own. She's worked for large tech companies like Google, Lyft, Uber, TikTok, and the New York Times, and she has been featured in CNBC, BBC, and Business Insider. Quite the impressive pedigree. Welcome to the show, Farah.
Thank you so much for having me, Kendall. Lovely to be here. And thanks to all of your lovely listeners for asking me to come on. I'm honored.
It's super fun. And so we were chatting right before we got started that being a career coach in the content world is like a wild ride. So what did your wild ride look like? How did you get here? Where are you going? Tell us all the things.
Okay, so I'll be as brief as I possibly can while being as detailed and focused as possible. So in terms of my education, I have an undergraduate degree in computer science from the University of North Texas. And I went there specifically to...
No, I'm interrupting.
Did you graduate from UNT?
My degree is in mathematics from UNT, and I took all the comp sci classes because you had to major in math. Okay, small world, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I got chills. That's not an
exaggeration.
Nobody's
ever heard of, too. And I'm like, what are the odds?
Oh, that's so funny. So when I started at UNT, we were in the general academic building, which is the GAB in the middle of the campus. And then they had bought the old HP building, and then they would bus us out because send the engineers off the campus. Go Mean Green.
I was going to say, were you Eagles or Mean Green? Because there was a switch that happened and
I was more of the white albino squirrel.
Okay, fair.
Because he lived near my dorm.
Yes. So for anyone listening, that was a total aside, but now Farah and I are best friends. So please continue with your story.
Gosh. That's awesome. Now we have a lot to talk about, Fry Street and all sorts of fun things. Okay, cool. But I went there because they had game programming as a focus. And it was at the time the only university in the nation that had it. But then I got to campus and I started seeing what was involved in creating games and calculus and physics. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do graphics programming. 2D is a little bit easier than 3D. It's a little easier to stomach. I bring this up for a reason, and I'll tell you why later. So my dad was also a university professor. His specialty was digital imaging and signal processing, specifically the ability to read text within images and videos. So when I did my internships, I interned with him at Siemens, worked on postal automation machines. And so my dad wrote algorithms to convert images into basically recognize text within images and videos. Sorry, I got really... Yeah, OCR. There you go.
Cool. All right. I'm tracking.
He worked with OCR and ICR technology. And so I also helped my dad a bit. So worked as an engineer for a while. Terrible time to be an engineer when I was. And so someone suggested I go work in finance. So I ended up working in finance for a decade. Spent 7 years at Fidelity Investments. I got 7 promotions in 7 years. which people are like, how'd that happen? I was like, well, started work in 2007 and then this big crash in '08 happened. And because of that, my career skyrocketed, which was really cool. So stayed in finance for a decade, got laid off from a job. And one of my girlfriends said, hey, why don't you reach out to this recruiting agency, Robert Half? They might be able to help you get a job. So in the process of finding work, my recruiter suggested that I actually work as a recruiter. She goes, I think you'd actually be really great. Why don't you come join my team? And I was like, I'm just going to do this to like hack the job search strategy and let's figure this out. So started off an agency. I hated it. I was like, this is not a model for me. It's very backstabby. It didn't resonate with me. And so I went to another agency because I thought, well, maybe another agency would be better. Got laid off within 3 months. And then at that point, got the opportunity to interview at Apple through a connection. So a guy I worked with, his best friend, was a hiring manager within talent acquisition at Apple. Got the interview, did 8, got an offer verbally. Then they said, oh, sorry, we ran out of headcount. And I was like, no, how could you do this to me? So then another friend said, wait, a friend of mine's a recruiter at Google. Why don't you go talk to him? And so that's really where my, corporate recruiting career started from. Yeah, started, recruiting technical talent on the hardware and software side, Google, Lyft, Uber, TikTok, the New York Times. And actually, when I started working at TikTok was when I started creating content because I started seeing really bad armchair content where people were giving bad advice. I'm like, oh my God, if people do this, they will literally get put on a do not hire list, which is basically a blacklist. And so my first videos are honestly me pointing at words because I couldn't even speak. I was like, I can't. So that was my way of making videos. Then I found it to be an excellent way of recruiting talent. So I kind of like kept going. And then an interesting thing happened. And I'm bringing this up in case anybody out there wants to start creating content. It started rubbing my boss the wrong way. And so I realized, wait a minute, he's jealous because I'm getting power and he doesn't like it. Interesting. So rather than let that bog me down, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go somewhere else. And I did. And so that's really where like my career led me to where I am today. Throughout my recruiting process, I'd always been career coaching. I actually coached for a business called Hire Club. So did that off and on for many years. And then in my last role, I was laid off and I just said, okay, well, I guess I'll turn coaching on. And I haven't looked back since.
That's awesome. And before we started recording, we were like, we're going to have so much to talk about. I could spend a whole hour on things you just said, and we could never touch on any other topics. But I do find it really interesting because I started my technical career as a data scientist, writing algorithms and doing financial analytics. So that's where my career started, out of UNT as well. And very similar, 5 promotions in 7 years. I was offered a CFO ship before I was 30. And it was like that very fast progression. And so I actually have no recruiting experience aside from as the hiring manager, right? I've hired hundreds of people, but I've never recruited. And so different take on the same issue that kind of led me into content creation where people were saying, make sure your resume looks like this, or make sure that you're saying these things in the interview. And I was like, don't do that. I wouldn't hire that. Right. And similarly was like, I'm just gonna put my thoughts on the interwebs and see what happens.
Yeah. And I bring up the OCR technology. By the way, for those listening who don't know what that is, that's optical character recognition. So basically imagine like, a camera is capturing an image and then it has to interpret that image and determine what that actually is. And so they write these algorithms that are called binarization algorithms. So binary, zeros and ones, black and white. So they turn these images into black and white. And so, when it comes to applicant tracking systems, people like upload these like crazy looking resumes that are up for interpretation with all sorts of clip art. I call them Cheesecake Factory menu resumes. And I'm like, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. Because when that resume gets converted into something that the computer can actually read, it can't parse that data because it can't actually see the text. And, when I explain this to people, they get all upset and, wow, you're just trying to prevent me from getting a job. I'm like, what are you like? They prefer like stories over statistics and actual data. And I'm like, wait a minute, I've worked with 7 applicant tracking systems. I know exactly which OCRs they're using. And I've worked with recruiting operations. I've worked with Tableau to like extract data, to like look at our recruiting efforts, et cetera. Because I've been a manager and a hiring manager in recruitment as well, not just an individual contributor. Like I know how this works. And so like I don't know about you, Kendall, but do you ever feel like there's this like fight between like armchair experts and like people who've actually have experience?
Yeah. So my husband would call that PEBCAC. The problem exists between computer and chair. Like between your computer and your chair, I'm sensing an issue. And my good rule of thumb is if you have ever loaded a resume for a job application, the next page is usually, please enter your job history information. And everybody's like, why do I have to do this if I just loaded it in the resume? Most of the time, that company will parse your data into what it thinks your job experience is. If it loads really poorly, it's going to load really poorly into the ATS. And I'm not talking minor formatting things or it turns a bullet into a question mark. I'm talking like if the whole thing looks wrong, your resume is formatted in such a way that the ATS is not going to be able to digest it because that company is basically showing you the ATS output and they're like, confirm this. And if it looks really bad, the ATS isn't going to be able to digest it. So I agree with you. And I think, this is no shade on people who are used to doing things a certain way. I used to have a Cheesecake Factory menu resume.
Yeah.
12 years ago when people were physically reviewing resumes. And it worked really well for me because they would get an image of me, they would get like my phone number, they knew where to find me. I got a lot of interviews that way. But if you're not applying for a creative position, in which case it should be in your portfolio, not in your resume anyways, and if you're applying to anything using an ATS, which is pretty much every job, it's not going to work anymore. Like it was great when people were looking at them. You used to be able to take out a classified ad when you really wanted a job. Okay, that's like a way throwback, but now you got to play the game the way it is. So you are very familiar with the job market. You're helping your clients really navigate finding careers in what has been called a very difficult job market right now, right? The transition, I would say beginning of 2024 to now, we have seen, in my opinion, a very big slowdown in what is happening in the job market and what jobs are being posted. We're seeing more ghost positions where like the company's like, we're hiring, but then that position's not real and it's just sitting there. So what are some of the trends you're seeing in the job market? And then what are some of the things that you're at a high level encouraging your clients to do to kind of break through what's happening? If you have been eagerly awaiting the Secrets of the Career Game book, it is officially available for pre-order. This book will go over 36 strategies for building success in your career. And honestly, is some of my best lessons, best templates, and best ways for you to start to get the success and the progression in your career that you deserve. If you do pre-order the book, make sure that you email a screenshot of your pre-order to thatcareercoach@gmail.com in order to be added to our top secret community. In that community, you'll have access to me as well as 2 live Q&A sessions when the book launches. You'll also get an extra early copy with the first chapter of the book for you to read ahead. Go to Amazon, find Secrets of the Career Game, 36 strategies for your career. Go ahead, place your pre-order and send us an email.
Sure. So as a former recruiter, I never posted a ghost job. So I think that's something we should also address because there are times where companies will post what we call evergreen requisitions. So personally, I've never been a fan of this. When I went to work for the New York Times, this was something that they implemented in engineering. And I was like, y'all are nuts. Because if you need to hire 10 different engineers for 10 different teams within a vertical, why are you posting an evergreen requisition? Like you're using the wrong bait to catch the right engineers. So I actually overhauled all engineering hiring for the New York Times. Like, I mean, I don't want to give away any secrets, but let's just say that they were kicking it old school for a while. So we had to modernize them, kind of like pull them into the modern times. What I have noticed though is that there is an increasing level of frustration on the job seekers side. Rightly so, right? I'm not saying it's not frustrating, but here's the thing. None of us were ever taught properly how to find a job, how to search for a job. We were just trained to be workers, right? Elementary school, university, like all of that. You're just trained to work hard and expect to get the thing, to get the trophy. And that's not how it works. You are not trained to know how to be an entrepreneur. Even the best universities out there that have, like entrepreneurship opportunities, it's kind of like it's outside of the curriculum of your syllabus, right? That's not what university is designed for. University is its own institution. Again, My dad was a professor. A lot of my aunties and uncles, quote unquote, are all professors. And they'll even tell you, like, yeah, and I answered to the chairman. The chairman says, we got to keep students happy to get our scores up so we can keep attracting more students. And that means just, giving the students what they want. And if what they want is, I don't want to work hard, I just want to use ChatGPT to write my code for me because I don't actually want to learn, then they have to acquiesce, which is a really sad thing to see. And so I'm seeing that in academia where students are getting lazier and like using AI in the wrong way, right? You still have to learn. Like I remember spending hours in the lab just like trying to figure out certain like algorithms. Like it just wasn't clicking. But after a few hours of me banging my head on the wall, it finally worked. And I'm like, great. And it stuck. And that's how it really should be in order for that to really stay. So in terms of the job market, yeah, seeing a lot of people getting really frustrated because they don't really understand the value of their labor. So when they're out there in the marketplace, they're like, well, I did this at work and I did this at work. I'm like, why'd you do that? Because my boss told me to. Why'd your boss tell you to do that? I don't really know. Why didn't you ask? Or maybe let's like reverse engineer it. Like, what projects did you work on? Well, I kind of worked on this thing. I worked on that thing. Okay, what about your performance reviews? Do you have any of that information? So it's like, just like kind of like trying to get people to understand that they're not just there to go clock in, do a job and go home for the most part, right? I mean, I'm talking like white collar jobs, not blue collar jobs. But even so, the money that the company is making off of your labor is clearly more than what they're paying you.
It should be.
It should
be. Or the company wouldn't pay you.
Exactly. They'll just go find somebody else. So why are you working? Like, what is the value of your labor in the current marketplace? That's the other thing too, is people don't realize like the value of labor changes. So for example, at one point, there were more recruiter openings and software engineering openings during COVID, when COVID first happened. And so the value of recruiting labor shot up. And then companies said, oops, sorry, we overhired. And then they just slashed their talent acquisition teams. And so then the value of recruiter labor actually came down.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And this is something that I talk about often as well, is you have to understand the impact of your work. And making like a slight parallel, the same is true when it comes to advocate for a promotion. I see people all the time go, well, I did this, this, and this in my job. You should promote me. And I'm like, well, but they paid you to do that.
Yeah, those are just your deliverables. Like, that's just your core job.
It's your salary right there, right? And so when I talk to clients about like advocating for promotion, I'm like, you need to tell them what impact it's going to get the company that they're not getting right now for them to pay you more money, right? What are you going to deliver? What are you going to do? Who are you going to manage? How are you going to help them? And then find market research that backs up that labor value. Like what listings are on LinkedIn and what are they getting paid? If you're going to your boss, I'm going to use COVID as an example since you did, like I knew engineers making like $500,000 in COVID. No offense to my very smart, beautiful engineers out there. That's ridiculous. Like, love you guys.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
Oh no, you want to hear a crazier story? I'm not going to say which company, but I know an engineer who got a $900,000 sign-on bonus.
This is what I'm saying. Like COVID, there was some crazy stuff that happened. Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you're like, that didn't happen to me,
it happened.
That's okay. That's yeah. It's okay if it didn't happen to you because those people have since been laid off and now have no money. So it's fine. Pretty much. Then those people come to you and they're like, hey, I want a developer role. I want $500,000 in my next role because I want to make more than I'm making now. And I'm like, dude, that job should have never existed in the first place, let alone to expect to maintain at that level. The market just doesn't support it a lot of times. So I love what you're saying of like, we've got to be a little bit realistic. What does the market support? What salaries are out there? What can you expect to make for certain levels of seniority? And I'm not saying you shouldn't want more money in your next job. We all want more money in our next job. But then gearing your story, your resume, your LinkedIn towards that impact that they're going to get that they're buying. But I love that. I'd love to hear, you mentioned earlier, you said people underestimate the value of their labor or overestimate. How would that translate in the job search? Because like something that I'm seeing a lot is like, you got to put in more effort right now, more time, more labor to get an interview or to get a job. What does that look like from your perspective?
So AI has made the job search much more challenging and difficult in ways that were not quite expected by the public. And what I mean by that is because I have a lot of people that I know in my network who are active recruiters, they're all telling me that they are getting flooded and bombarded with AI resumes. And when I say AI resumes, I'm not saying you as an individual clicking and applying with a resume that you use ChatGPT to help you write. I'm talking there are services out there where you pay $20 a month and they will spray and pray your resume to all of these companies. And I've heard that there is like an overnight cycle around 2 to 3 in the morning where all of a sudden they'll get this like influx of these resumes. So part of the other problem of what's going on in the labor market is the volume of applicants has increased dramatically. However, the proportion of qualified versus unqualified candidates has remained the same. That proportion is 75% unqualified, 25% qualified. And I'm sure some of y'all are listening. You're like, I'm 100% qualified for every job I apply to. I bet you're not. I bet you are not. And let me tell you how I know this, because I have clients. For example, I have this one lady and I adore her and she's really sweet. And she applied for a job at a very, very popular Silicon Valley company. It was a sales role. And I go, it says here you have to be fluent in either Spanish or Portuguese. Are you? She said, no. I go, why did you apply to this job? And she said, well, because it was remote. And I go, but you don't speak these languages, therefore you are wholly unqualified for this job. And she was like, yeah. I go, okay, moving on. So really look at the job qualifications. That job description is written in a way where they're telling you exactly what they're looking for. And you have to be able to read between the lines. So you also have to be able to interpret what are they actually hiring for? What are the gaps that the hiring manager has that if they hire you, you're going to fill and close in those gaps? People don't look at it from that perspective. They look at the job title, they look at the compensation, they look at the location. They just kind of skim the requirements. They're like, good enough. I'll just apply. And if they like me, great. And if they don't like me, oh, well, all I did was spend 5 minutes applying to a job. And then they get frustrated because all they do is throw spaghetti on the wall over and over, and they think that that is effort. And unfortunately, job search historically has been very transactional. And I'm sorry, we can't go back to the 1960s where you could just like literally walk into an office, shake someone's hand, and get a job offer. That's just not the world that we live in because we have education inflation, right? A lot of people are getting educated, they're getting certified. There are too many qualified people out there in the labor market. So now you're competing with everybody else. And so you also have to see where the skill set's going. What are companies hiring for? Because a lot of the layoffs that have happened in tech have been a result of shift in priorities, right? Mm-hmm. It's cheaper for a company to lay off staff rather than train them up into, let's say, these new tools or the new AI, whatever it might be, right? So being realistic and realizing that the company is not your family. They're not there to take care of you, right? I really love the sprinkle lady, Shira 7. It's like, you're there to make money, honey. They're there to make money off your labor too. This is a money exchange, okay? Like, just know they are not out of the goodness of their heart going to train you. If they train you, it's because it's cheaper to train you than to hire somebody else.
Yes. No, that's absolutely true. So last thing on the job market, and then we'll switch gears just a little bit. But love to hear what role networking is playing today from a recruiter's perspective, right? Forbes published a study in December that said 45% of roles are being filled by somebody the hiring manager either knows or was referred to the hiring manager. I'm curious, having lived it, like how much do you see network and relationships playing in the job space?
I mean, I don't know where that statistic came from. I think that's a little high, but I do believe that networking is very, very important. It's becoming more important as we kind of like move through this cycle of hiring because, again, there's so much qualified labor out there. How are they going to possibly differentiate between candidates? Like, for example, let's say you wanted to hire an executive assistant because you're that girl and you're busy. Who are you likely going to hire? Somebody who like just like sent in an application, or like your best friend going, hey, I work with this person. They're amazing. Like, and you should talk to this person. Who do you want to talk to? Obviously, the one that your friend is going to recommend, right? So part of the problem though with networking is that people, when they need it, is when it's a little too late, right? They don't really keep up with their network. They're not going out there and being active. So, just go to a conference once a year. Come on. Like, this is part of your job. Like, not just your core job, but like, these are the external things that you really need to be doing for longevity in your career. And for those of you who are like, this is exhausting, I'm like, welcome to working in corporate. Like, this is the game. If you don't want to play the game, get out of the game. Go do something else and you'll be happier probably.
So this is a perfect segue. Thank you so much for that, Farah.
My pleasure.
Because a lot of my content is focused on the game itself, right? Careers do not work the way that we theoretically think they should, right? I would love for everybody to like pick daisies on their lunch break and never work past 4:30 and their boss gives them Christmas presents. And like, I would love for this utopian career society to exist. Experience, it really doesn't. So when you think of the career game, I love what you said. Like, if you don't want to be part of the career game, exit the career game. Probably be happier. I also tell people you can choose not to play, but then don't expect the results of somebody who does play.
Exactly.
But love to hear you've had an exciting career, right? You've done technology, you've done finance, you've done recruiting. How have you seen the game kind of play out? And what are some of the areas where like you would tell somebody like, hey, just be smart with this, and otherwise you're going to hurt your own progression?
I think the one thing that's universal throughout all of them is just like, watch your mouth.
Girl, watch your mouth.
Girl, watch your mouth. What you saying? Be careful what you say around other people. Again, you don't know if your bestie at work is actually your bestie or if they're the one who wants to step on you to get that promotion. I'm not saying that we have to look at everybody with a side eye, but like, remember your place. When you enter that building, you are a different person. You are the corporate version of you. Right? Like, this is a mask that we have to wear, and realize that we are always on stage, no matter what. Do not talk badly about your colleagues. If there are any issues, still speak in a professional tone, manner, be respectful. Even if somebody's being a jerk and an asshole, send that to HR, document that. Don't deal with it yourself. That ain't your job. That actually isn't your job. Go send that off to somebody else. If somebody wants to like get in the weeds with you because they've got problems, go talk to your manager about it, but make sure it's documented before you do that. Otherwise, like, they're going to be like, we're not your therapist. Because like, remember, HR is not your friend or your therapist. All right.
That's why you have a career coach who can be both your friend and your therapist.
Right. And I tell people, I was like, listen, like, HR is there for a purpose, right? They are there to protect the company and the employees. They are there to do that. However, they're not your therapist. And any company that would employ a therapist, like, it's probably not a good idea. It's like, what, you need to spend money for a full-time therapist here? Like, what is this, Palantir? Sorry.
Red flag. Red flag.
Someone at Palantir is going to hear this and be like, I can't believe she said that.
How dare they? It's okay. There are companies I could slide into that example as well.
But that would be, I think, the main thing throughout. Like, doesn't matter now or 20 years from now. It's still going to be true.
I feel like this should be your new content slogan. Just watch your mouth. But I love it because it is true. I say all the time, like, it's not, people will come to me and say, but my boss doesn't care about my opinion. They don't listen to what I say. Then how are you saying it? Like, start with how are you saying it, and start with should you be saying it? And if those two things are both like, I'm saying it correctly, and yes, it's part of my core job and I should be saying it, then we talk about like, how do we manage up? How do we build relationships? How do we navigate that? But like, if you're going to your boss and you're like, so-and-so was mean to me in the morning meeting, and like, Jeff won't send me this report, and Scott made me sad, like, your boss is going to look at you and be like, yo, bro.
Yeah, that means you have communication issues, and maybe that's something you need to work on offline in terms of like, there are ways of having, healthy discussions, and like, confrontation is not a bad thing. You just have to be able to approach it from a healthy perspective, and just know that when you approach someone with something, that you don't approach them with anger, right? Or with like, I can't believe you didn't listen to me. No, you are a grown adult. Act like it. And by the way, I say that with love and respect, but like, be very neutral in your communication and just say, hey, lay it all out there. Wait for the feedback, right? And, it's not your boss's job to be your mom or your dad. They're not your parent. They're your boss. Like, they're there to like, make sure you don't do dumb things, to water down communications from on high, to make sure you do your job, and, make sure your time cards and your paychecks are running the way they should. Like, that's about it.
I love it. So please comment below this episode if you would like Farah and I to do a whole series called Girl, Watch Your Mouth, where we just talk about stupid stuff we've heard people say in the workplace and how they should have said it instead, because I feel like this is like a content series that we should be running. I feel like we need it. So comment below if you're interested in that. But otherwise, Farah, at the end of every episode, I always ask the same question. If somebody is looking to take control of their job search, take control of their career, what is one piece of tactical advice you would tell them, like, go do this tomorrow, this will start you off on the right foot and get them started in the direction they want?
I would say that think of yourself as a brand and actually think about your own branding. Who are you as a brand? So I say this with love because, again, I have clients who come to me and they're like, recruiters aren't reaching out to me. I'm like, you don't have anything on your link. You don't even have a profile picture on your LinkedIn. Why would anybody reach out to you? You are a ghost. Why would they reach out to ghosts? Come on. If you want the things, you have to do the things. So in terms of your brand, like what value do you bring to the marketplace? Like if a company hires you, why would they be stupid not to hire you? Think about it from that perspective. Approach your LinkedIn as your, hey, if somebody were to learn more about me, this is what I want them to know about me. And then when you approach your internal branding at your company, know what the limitations are, right? You can't just be that person that like thinks outside of the box, because you have to like think outside of the box within the corporate box, right? Mm-hmm. That's just a fact. Again, if you want to be that creative type and be an individual and be loved for that, go off and do your own thing, like with love, mazel tov, like, you know, like again, like there's nothing wrong with that. But I think oftentimes people go, well, I want to be respected for like what I'm saying. And, you know, they have all of these ideas and you go, listen, I think that's really great that you're thinking in this capacity. However, you don't understand what's going on levels above you.
Yes.
So when you get to that, when, you know, you get to the top of that mountain someday in your career, you're going to go look down and go, oh, I was really naive. Right. But also, again, think about like that branding piece. So when you do go to conferences, you introduce yourself, you've got that 5-second pitch of like, yep, this is what I do. This is, you know, who I help, etc. And that, again, that will carry you forward throughout your corporate career.
Yeah, I love that. And you're so right about the context piece. I feel like the more senior I get in my career, I look back and I'm like, ooh,
why did I say that?
Why did I do that? Like, I'll wake up at 2 a.m. and be like, remember that one time in 2009 in a meeting where you said this stupid thing? And I'm like, why did I do that? Like, it's amazing how the wrinkles of your brain save space for things like that, but not to remember what you need at the grocery store.
So true.
This was such a fun episode, Farah. Thank you so much for coming on That Career Coach podcast, Secrets of the Career Game. Where can people find you if they want to learn more, if they want to connect with you, if they want to be your best friend? Where do they go?
Well, thank you again so much for having me, Kendall. You can find me on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. So it's Farah Sharghi, Farah, so one R, not two. And also my website, farahsharghi.com.
Awesome. Well, we will link all of that in the show notes below. If you liked today's episode, go ahead and give us 5 stars. Leave us any questions or comments below so we can get back to you guys. But otherwise, Farah, it was fabulous having you on. We'll have to have you back. And thank you guys so much. We'll have another great episode next week.